You're listening in on an animated discussion about Superman the Animated Series with two experts in their fields. I'm Joshua Unruh, superhero scholar.
And I'm Caleb Masters, your friendly neighborhood film critic extraordinaire from thecinematropolis.com. And today's topic is stolen memories. Joshua, I just am going to take a second here to gush. I don't ever know how intentional the story choices were for like a little big picture like DCAU, like with between Superman and Batman and Static Shock and Justice League and then Justice League Unlimited. But I will just say, with the knowledge of where they end up taking Brainiac and his story, I feel like this is the perfect introduction for Brainiac and Superman the Animated Series, and it only gets better from here. Every Brainiac story builds on this first story.
Yes.
In a way that is really impressive. Like, the more I was thinking through, like, looking back on, like, all the times Brainiac shows up, which is not as often as I thought it was. But when he shows up, it moves the needle forward on that character and that story. And this is like... This is a great use of him the first time, like kind of the classic. He shows up on Earth, he starts siphoning information. Of course, he's going to team up with Lex. We'll get into that here in a minute. But it feels like it sets the stage for what we're going to expect from Brainiac stories moving forward in a really cool way, honestly.
No, I agree. I feel like you can look at where they wind up with him and say, yeah, this makes sense. Like every time he shows, it's a little bit like we talked about Mr. Freeze with BTAS and even into New Batman Adventures is he's never a static character, right? Like he's got a shtick, he's got a deal. For a long time, Mr. Freeze has only the one goal, and it's kind of the same with Brainiac. But nevertheless, his approaches to that one goal and his emotional reactions to failing to reach that goal change him every single time we see him. You're absolutely right. This is still basically the Brainiac that we saw escaping Krypton, more or less, self-interested, cold and calculating. But he's going to be a little different the next time we see him and a little different the next time until finally we're just like, how did we get to this?
Right.
And it's natural character development. That's how.
Well, I think the thing that I find interesting about it is we think we understand what his like game is, and whenever it's not that we're wrong about it, but I think it's like every time we see him, we realize just how big his a world he's playing in,
Yeah.
Because his plan here seems pretty big and grand, but really it's a small piece of a much bigger plan that he's executing, and I just think it's again. Good storytelling long term. It feels like it all felt planned. Like if I were to go back, it feels like it's planned, executed, almost to perfection.
If they told me that they planned out Brainiac's evolution, right, I would have a hard time believing it just because of the stuff I know about how these shows came together behind the scenes. But if I didn't know any of that stuff, I'd be like, I 100% agree. Like, this makes total sense. It just makes sense. That's a lot of character stuff. Let's talk about his look, because I showed up to this episode originally way back in the day with two very different images of Brainiac in my mind. But I believe that this is your first and really main brush with that character. Am I right about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I will say I've read enough comics since then that I've seen several different iterations of Brainiac. So I've come to appreciate multiple versions of him. But I will say this is the one I saw first. I was very young when I watched this episode. So, the first impressions make a big difference. So every time I'd see other versions of Brainiac, I'd be like, well, yeah, but that doesn't look as good. Or that looks a lot different than the definitive, quote unquote, definitive Brainiac, which in my mind, definitive version is what is played in this show. But I mean, you have different touch points.
Yeah, a couple. And just for a little bit of comic book background here, originally Brainiac was a green-skinned humanoid alien, bald, kind of almost like a green Lex Luthor, honestly, in a pink unitard. Bare legs, bare arms, bare head with some circuitry like built into his skull, not in a creepy way because this was a long time ago before we were doing everything super creepy, This would be like 50s and 60s Superman comics. And he was originally not from Krypton. He was from a planet called Kalu. And there is this weird space where my mental image of Brainiac is not that version. But because I love the Legion of Superheroes so much, and his descendant, Brainiac 5, is in the Legion as a green-skinned, blonde-haired teenage version of himself, that it's like simultaneously very much the way I picture him and not at all the way I picture him, because the other touch point that I have is very much what I would call the Brainiac of my youth, who looks like a skeletal robot thing. And this would have been the one that was very popular in toys and the Superpowers action figures, and also the Super Friends cartoon that was on in the like mid to late 80s. I was very skeptical when I showed up to Superman the Animated Series and they folded Brainiac into Krypton. I was really like, I don't know how I feel about that.
For listeners who might not be in the know, just to clarify, this was a show invention. We talked about this in the original episode. Brainiac has historically not been from Krypton in the comics or any other films before this.
And in fact, he also still collected knowledge and information from other planets, but he did it differently than this one. He actually shrunk the most major city of any planet and just took that city. So if you are familiar with some of the weirder Silver Age stuff going on with Superman, he has a bottle city from Krypton in his fortress. That's the bottle city of Kandor. The reason he has a shrunken down city with tiny Kryptonians living in it is because he saved it from Brainiac, which we'll see mirrored to an extent in this episode. But yeah, so that's really, this is a completely different take on Brainiac from anything that we'd had before, because even the very robot version of Brainiac was an in-fiction evolution of the biological computer that he was originally. The green-skinned alien with circuitry built into him is the same character as the robot guy. Like, he changed himself. He evolved himself within the fiction. And so those are my guys. And then when I got to this in the late 90s, I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. But clearly, it grew on me.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, I like it because, I think it has, compared to, like, say, the skeletal version, the thing I like about this is it more or less matches Superman's frame a little more. It's boxier, it's broad-chested.
Yeah.
So it looks like more like a physical match for Superman. But I still like the dead eyes. Like, they're just blank, soulless eyes. And I think it's Corey Burton's the voice actor. Does a really good job at just... What's interesting about Brainiac is, of course, he's a computer, so you assume he has no emotions, but it's the way he's able to convey...
Yeah, but sometimes he does,
That's what I'm saying, because he definitely has emotions. Like, his plots and scheming and all that, he is very much an emotional creature, but the way it's kind of buried beneath this cold, calculating voice... that makes it sound like it's all logical. I find fascinating. I think it's a good take on the character, at least from my perspective.
I have one visual issue with this, and that's that I honestly think a more vivid green skin color would have been interesting, much more interesting to look at than this very like calm, chill blue. And I think I'm not alone either, because at one point in the script, somebody says, "It's the green guy." And I'm like, that guy's not green. So apparently there was an earlier version where he was more like the primary green that he originally was in the comics. And I don't hate this calmer blue. It's fine. But I actually do think, as far as like visual contrast, like he's a very pale...
It lacks a lot of personality. I'll say that. I think that's a very intentional choice. But yeah, I would say it does lack personality.
And inside the ship, he almost fades into the background of his own ship, like on the interiors. And some green might have helped with that. But it also might have been hideous. Like, I'm not second guessing those guys. They probably did some tests with him as green and were like, oh God, this is bad. So if it was green, maybe I'd hate it, But just looking at it, I'm like, I just really wish he had a dash of color,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. He is, again, like that soulless vibe. And even the fact that he looks like his ship and blends in with the ship. If I were to guess, I'd say that's an intentional choice because he's all machinery. But, I see where you're coming from, and I don't necessarily disagree. He is kind of flat in comparison to some of the other Rogues Gallery that we have seen and will see.
They make creative decisions with him that I can understand and agree are competent decisions. Like, I understand why they did what they did, and I like the idea. But then when it comes out the other end, I'm like, but he spends, in this episode especially, he spends all of his time on this ship, and just, doesn't stand out from his own ship enough. But by the way, I'm a big fan of his ship.
It's a cool ship. It's big. It's flat. Reminds me kind of like a Death Star, or sorry, Star Destroyer.
Yeah.
Correct. Very, very important difference there. Star Destroyer looks a lot more like that. I dig it a lot, actually. It definitely looks more like it's a ship that's invading something, which should have been a red flag to the humans in this episode.
It's true.
I think it's cool.
What I love about it is that it is both absolutely humongous and yet still looks like it's like sleek and fast at the same time. It manages to be, like a whale. You know what I mean? Like, look at it. It's huge, but it's also made to be fast in the ocean, And then they dash it with some Kirby tech on the sides that, looks like it belongs with Brainiac. I really love the exterior of the ship, and I like the interior very much because it's cavernous and mostly empty and cold. Like, it's a totally impersonal warehouse, which feels very Brainiac to me.
No, agreed. And I think that all goes back to that choice. I really think it was a conscious creative decision. No personality. It's impersonal.
Yeah,
it's robotic. It's machinery. I think all of that was intentional. I mean, again, I don't know this, but it seems like those choices all align. And I think the ship is a very good representation of that as well.
I mean, he's a human iPad 20 years before there was an iPad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right down to the, I was actually thinking about, how the new iPhones have the three little camera lenses right next to each other. I was like, hey, Brainiac's little computers have the same three eyes. So maybe Brainiac's in all of our cell phones. That's all I'm saying.
So let me ask you, we'll talk more about him here in a minute because I really like Brainiac's servitor robots also, but is this the first time that we have really appreciated technology on Superman the Animated Series since Krypton? Is this the first time they've actually put any effort into designing the tech?
Oh, yeah. No, I'd say so. Because up until at this point, it's really mostly just been like military grade, like weapons, planes and missiles and stuff. This actually feels like we're leaning into the tech whole hog.
And even with some of the Kryptonian stuff, and we'll talk about it again because it's been repurposed, but like Superman's ship that brought him from Krypton to Earth is not great. Like, it's not terrible, but it's not great. And all of his alternative suits, which again we'll get to, but it's like they're fine. But they're not blowing my mind. But and this ship doesn't, I'll just be honest, the ship doesn't blow my mind either. But I look at it and I go, that's Brainiac's ship and I like it,
It's a cool aesthetic choice.
The only way they could be more on the nose is what they do much later, which is also from the comic books, is when they make a giant Brainiac head floating over the city, right? We'll get to it.
Right.
We'll get to it.
We'll get to it eventually.
But I like
down the road.
this.
We'll get there.
I like this space whale warehouse thing. And folded into that, I want to mention the memory orbs. I really like the memory orbs.
Yes, the memory orbs are great. That's probably the most personalized part of the entire ship.
Right.
He's got a room dedicated to the history of all these different planets.
And it feels like a really inhuman way to store information. It doesn't seem organized in any way that we would recognize, like they're just floating around, but it's also a really tactile experience. Superman has to touch them to access them. And so it really works for me as science fiction technology because it very much feels like something that is not what we would do, but we also get it. We understand it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agreed. I thought that part was nice. You mentioned the ship, Superman's ship. We also got a sneak peek or quick peek, I should say, at his repurposed ship. So I guess he's rebuilt it for space exploration now.
Yeah, along with Dr. Emil Hamilton and Star Labs, it looks like they've refurbed the baby rocket into one that a grown man can ride in, and I don't know if I buy it, but I also don't care enough to fight about it,
Right. Yeah, exactly. And we get Superman in his spacesuit again, so that's nice. Is this the first time we've seen him in the spacesuit?
I think we've seen the spacesuit in the background, next to the anti-kryptonite suit, but I don't think we've seen him in it. So I think this is the first time for that. And it's fine, right? It's okay.
Yeah, it's fine. It's all fine. It's all just fine. It's not great. I don't know. Maybe the budget got cut when it came to space designs.
I just don't know that they thought they'd use it very often. I don't know. I will say it's so boring. His spacesuit is so boring to me that it makes me long for the days when Superman did not need a spacesuit to go into space. Like, just
I for real though.
Just wear your clothes up there, dude. You're invulnerable to radiation. You can hold your breath for like 8 hours. Just go up there on your own, not in this boring white suit that happens to have your logo stenciled on it. Like,
agreed, 100%. So, one thing I wanted to touch on here, I think Brainiac adds, just from a philosophical perspective, that maybe other members of the Rogues Gallery doesn't, is this idea that knowledge is power. So when Superman meets him, he said, after he runs through Brainiac's little test, he says, "I am Krypton." From that moment, you're like, okay, so he's one of those knowledge is power guys. He has downloaded all of the knowledge of Krypton, so that's what gives him power over Superman.
Yes.
And to a certain extent, more power he could leverage to all the Kryptonian technology that he knows about that other people don't as well. And he aspires, so his aspiration, his motivation is to be the god of all knowledge.
Yeah.
And I find it very interesting that his approach to achieving become the god of all knowledge is actually to eliminate the planets so that there is no more knowledge generated, and he holds on to only up to what existed, because he also kind of plays into this whole supply and demand, where he even says later in the episode, the fewer people who have the knowledge, the more valuable it is.
Unbelievable, right?
So he's like, all right, I'm going to kill everyone else on this planet who has this knowledge. I'm going to take it. I'm going to stop the progress of whatever was going on here. I'm going to kill all the living inhabitants so that I have what existed in this moment and all the knowledge that's related to it. So I find that it's chilling. But I think that's definitely in a way that Lex Luthor really, I think, is more ego-driven. And also kind of a knowledge is power type of guy, but something he executes and implements a lot differently. I think Brainiac is purely all about achieving knowledge for the sake of ruling the galaxy or the universe or whatever. But he isn't really, like, it's not driven by personal ambition or personal gain, really, even as much as it is my goal. What I was programmed to do was to collect all knowledge.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to stop until I get there. It's different than Lex, who has all these like motivations and personal gains and ego issues with having Superman be better than him. It's all calculation and it's all programming. And I find that to be really interesting. But I will say he also, despite being very calculating and human and how his motivations, he finds ways to manipulate knowledge to achieve his goals as well.
Totally,
which is very, very human. It brings a human aspect to what he's doing. So I don't know. I find Brainiac to be pretty philosophically interesting, a philosophical foil. But I also like the way that we see he's contradictory of himself.
Yes, he's extremely multi-layered.
Yes.
And doesn't look like it. Like, your first impression of him is one layer, what you see is what you get, cold calculating, steal the knowledge, destroy everything and move on. But he seems to want a friend, like in Superman. Maybe it's because of the Kryptonian heritage, whatever it is, but he wants Superman to come with him. We're never really given an inkling as to why he wants that, which means we just have to fill it in. And we can do it sinister. I want to get one over on Jor-El's idiot child. I could believe that. I could also believe, I'm actually programmed to serve the people of Krypton, and I did that in a very specific way that I don't regret because I'm a robot, right? I'm a computer. But at the same time, I would be more fulfilled if what I were doing were for a Kryptonian. There's all kinds of ways we can fill that in. They give us nothing. But the fact is, there's enough meat here for us to make up 2 or 3 different motivations for that. And I like that. It's fascinating how multi-layered he turns out to be.
Yeah, absolutely. No, or even like maybe he's trying to lure Kal-El into space so he can experiment on him and gain knowledge about his biology. I don't know. All sorts of different ways you could take it. Yeah, and I do think we get more, not clear answers, but more clarity on what his overall goals for that are, like, down the road.
Absolutely,
but especially in this episode. Yeah, we're not really sure what he wants. from Superman specifically.
Yeah. I had this thought. This is a very comic book nerd thought. Okay. And I may have to explain it, and I may cut all of this if I have to explain it too much. But the thought that I had was that Brainiac in this episode is like a much more relatable Galactus from Marvel Comics.
Oh, yeah.
Are you familiar with Galactus outside of the god-awful Fantastic Four sequel?
I mean, yes.
Okay.
I have seen him in the god-awful Fantastic Four cartoon. Yes, wow. I'm familiar. Okay, god-awful is a strong word.
No,
I haven't watched it in years.
No,
it's probably not very good.
You're correct. You are correct. It's very bad.
I've also played Marvel Ultimate Alliance.
Oh,
so
right.
I got some knowledge. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So the short version is that Galactus is a world eater. He has a hunger that can only be satisfied by destroying planets. But he's not just destroying them he's not evil. He's a literal force of nature, right? And so when he shows up, especially the first time that he shows up, he's very much just like a thing to be stopped and not a character to interact with, right? That's why the Silver Surfer exists as his herald, actually, is to create a human face of Galactus for the Fantastic Four to interact with. We do get some more from him as the decades go on, but what I love about this, why I thought about this, is that Galactus just destroys and moves on, and it's not for nothing. He is serving he's basically like an alpha predator of the universe, so it's not for nothing. But in this case, we know exactly why Brainiac is doing what he's doing. We can be horrified by it, right? But we understand it, and it's a choice. He not a force of nature. So Brainiac is like a force of nature in how destructive he is, but he has wants and needs, even if we can't entirely grok them in this one episode.
Right.
And it just,
It's malicious. It's malicious it's a very malicious selfishness. You like, he has ends he's trying to meet, even if they're not clear at this moment what they are.
Yeah. So I just had that thought, a more relatable Galactus. And even if that was all you sat down to do, I was like, it works great. Like, that is excellent.
Now, I also, Joshua, another thing that struck me about this episode is we see the beginning of a fruitful and long-running relationship between Brainiac and Lex Luthor. So
that's true.
They, of course, in the DCAU, will go on to work together many times.
Yeah, which is also comic book accurate. They're drawing from decades of them teaming up because they really are. I mean, I've mentioned before, most of Superman's Rogues Gallery is pretty garbage. Lex and Brainiac are by far the two best rogues in his gallery, so of course they're going to team up every now and then,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, this goes back to that idea, too, I think we've talked about in past episodes, is that most of the problems in Metropolis are caused by Lex. Either he creates the bad guys or works with them.
Yeah.
This is a moment of him working with them, but this is like he sought out, he got the messages through his satellites and sent a message back. So, like, clearly he lured he's the one who brought Brainiac to Earth.
Yeah.
And then also gave him all of Earth's knowledge by letting him into his computer database. So, good job, Lex. Bringing on the destructive. You bring on your own demise of the human race.
Yeah.
Like the Brainiac did not find Earth per se. I mean, found Earth because of Lex.
He found Lex.
Yeah, I find that compelling as well. But the one thing I thought, there was one line in particular that struck me, and it was kind of talking about after he had called in and met with Brainiac the first time, made first contact, I guess. The military calls him out, and they say, well, in case you haven't heard, there's a thing called national security. And the next line I'm about to read, it made me vomit my mouth a little bit, but I was also like, oh boy, it's too true. There's also a thing called free enterprise. It was LexCorp that scanned the heavens. It was LexCorp that made contact, and it will be LexCorp that will reap the benefits. Yeah. Anyway, private enterprise, looking out for number one, not for the great wellness of the human race. Anyway,
no, that is really good. That is super strong. So there's a couple of things that you said that I want to touch on. And first of all, I agree 100% with a little bit of bile in your mouth, because when an uber capitalist and a warmonger are arguing, it's a push. Like, I'm not happy either way, But going back to Lex being the one that found Brainiac, and then also kind of combining that with Brainiac's first conversation with Superman, these are very Faustian bargains.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing that makes this interesting to me is how often Lex is compared to a Miltonian Satan, like from Paradise Lost,
Right.
And so for the devil to have a devil show up and offer him a Faustian bargain is really hot stuff. I like that a lot. And I like
I love it. I love it because it puts Lex out of his depth a little bit.
Yes.
Like he thinks he's in control. He's like, oh, I've got all of the military. I could blow up this entire city with the number of like weapons I've got pointed at that ship. Oh wait, he hacked our computer system and shut it down. What? Yeah. He's out of his depth a little bit, you know?
He gets outmaneuvered. And the flip side of that I really appreciate is that Brainiac is offering Superman a Faustian bargain also, except there's no way for Superman to know that, you know? Like he's legitimately interested in the offer of seeing the galaxy, you know, but he doesn't yet realize that Brainiac is not a force for good, you know? And so I'm just imagining a story about Dr. Faustus where Dr. Faustus doesn't realize it's the devil he's talking to, you know? It's a little more like something like Stephen King's Needful Things or something like that, where it's sinister and it's weird and it's definitely not human and we have to look really closely at it. But also, I'm attracted to this and it's not obviously evil. It's just different. The fact that Brainiac can show up and in one episode offer two different Faustian bargains that actually are very, very different in theme and flavor is darned impressive.
Very good. Really great use of Brainiac. And I will say, too, another thing I think Brainiac brings to the table is, especially as it relates to the Faustian bargain offer to Superman, is the temptation that he offers is, knowledge. So anyone who has curiosity, he can basically dangle this carrot in front of them and say, hey, like, you want to know what happened at Krypton? I've got the information. Let's work on this together, and I can share my knowledge with you. And the same with Lex, you know, saying I can give you the information you need to one-up Superman. So I just think it's a really great dynamic he brings to the table. Not to beat a dead horse about the knowledge is power, but the way he implements it here by trying to trick Superman. Even the thing he offers Superman is I can give you all the memories that you'll need to feel like you're living there.
Right.
I mean, that's it's pretty enticing stuff, right?
I am not personally adopted, but I have friends that are adopted, and we have talked about this in terms of like their bio family and how much they want to know and stuff like that. And even the friends of mine that say they don't want to know at all, right? Like, I'm not mad at them for giving me up, but they gave me up, so I don't want to know. Even those people will tell you, at least in my experience, the friends of mine that have talked to me about this still kind of wonder. Like they have made the intellectual choice. I don't want to know, but there's an emotional aspect that's like, I still kind of want to know, you know? And not for nothing, I think that while it might look like a throwaway scene, I think it's important that when we are first introduced to Superman in this episode, he's doing exploratory trips out into space. Yeah. Like they don't make a big point out of it. They don't draw that into the main story on its own, but I think it's tied in there. Like he is curious about seeing the rest of the galaxy and knows that he's equipped to do it in a way that the average human being is not. And then Brainiac just shows up and is like, silver platter, bro. You want to go? So good.
I didn't even think about Joshua. That's a great point. I hadn't even considered that, how thematically Superman is still seeking answers at the very first scene. And then, later in the episode, wow, that's good. That's good storytelling right there. Wow, because I totally was thinking that was a throwaway opening scene. But no, you're right. It really feeds into the themes of the episode. Now, I think one bone you and I both have to pick with this episode, in terms of
now
story.
Now we've talked about the good news. Let's talk about the one thing in this episode that is legitimately awful, and I am angry about it. Yes.
It is an extremely, on his face, lazy storytelling decision, and that was the decision to reveal, Brainiac's motivations through a dream sequence. What? I don't understand, especially when something that happens later in the episode contradicts the dream sequence. Like, okay, he touches the orb and we see him get flashes of Krypton. You're like, okay. So you're like, I think it's a huge stretch, but say for example, I bought it. I still think it's lazy, but say I bought it. And those memories are activated when he goes to sleep. Okay, I got it. All right. I don't like that, but I could say I bought it. The thing is, when he touches the next 3 orbs, he immediately sees the destruction of those planets. Like, literally one of the first things he sees. So I'm like, why didn't he see that when he touched the Kryptonian orb the first time? I don't understand. And yeah, it is a really, really lazy way to get around the fact that, and honestly kind of undermines how brilliant the Faustian deal he set up was. It's undermined by this, like, really just not well written reveal that, oh, when I go to sleep, the dream tells me everything, and oh, okay, now I got to stop Brainiac.
Yeah, I realized that they had to close a gap in the circuit, and I've spoken now with somebody who has done a lot more screenwriting, and one thing that he said to me that I thought was really interesting is it's never useful to be the person in the writer's room who says this doesn't work. If you say that, you better have another idea. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I was like, you know what? I get that. That actually makes a lot of sense. And from that perspective, if they really don't have any better ideas in the moment than this dream sequence, fine. You finished the episode, you got it out the door. But here we are sitting at this, doing a close watch and really noticing how expertly crafted the rest of this episode is as far as like mirroring Lex's deal with Brainiac next to Superman's deal with Brainiac, and this varying levels of Faustian bargain. And Superman does have like the heart of an explorer to a certain extent. Like I can see him spending his weekends going to the bottom of the ocean where he can survive and nobody else can, stuff like I could imagine this, right? Mm-hmm. All of that is great. This character work is great. The plot overall is great. Like the beats are okay, but the way that they have him discover that Brainiac is not to be trusted is just so spectacularly lazy, and I'm just incensed about it because the rest of the episode is so good. And as I mentioned in our previous episode of our show, I don't really like dream sequences most of the time, and this is probably the best example of why they're garbage, is that they are portentous stuff crammed into a scene that doesn't have any other place in the narrative. I disapprove deeply.
Well, it's a way to, again, I'm not against characters having dream sequences that I can go for a good dream sequence when it's implemented effectively. And even saying the character finding out the real motivation behind the bad guy, if the setup was there well enough, I could buy it.
Yeah.
But it is super not there.
It's not there.
The work was not done in this story to set up the fact that he would piece that together subconsciously. And again, I want to reiterate that the next time he touches other orbs, he immediately sees the demise of the planets. So I'm kind of like, all right, so why didn't that work that way the first time?
Right.
And if there was an explanation provided, sure, but there's not.
But
so
there
I
isn't.
just have to assume it's inconsistent. So I'm not a fan.
I have one other pretty serious quibble with this episode, and again, it's a decision I can understand, especially knowing some of the comic book history of these characters. But when Brainiac's ship is exploding and Superman flies through the memory orb room, he only saves one, and it's Krypton. And I understand that. But this is Superman we're talking about, and this is the last knowledge of dozens, at least, if not hundreds or thousands of civilizations. It just seems really selfish and out of character that he only saves Krypton. Does he make sure he saves Krypton first? Yes, and I could understand that. But then he flies right through the middle of them and doesn't grab one other one? I don't like it. I don't like it. Ones.
Well, and it goes again. And that's the thing. It's out of character for Superman in general. But even what we see of Superman later in the show, because like at the Fortress of Solitude, he starts collecting all these different cultures and artifacts around the world. So it just seems it's a weird choice. And maybe I'm misremembering and they explain it better in future episodes. But for right now, yeah, it definitely felt like a weird choice.
I just didn't understand it. Like he flies right through the middle of them, and I was like, reach out and grab two more. What is wrong with you?
Right.
So, but you bring up the Fortress of Solitude. This is it. The introduction of the Fortress of Solitude. And I have to tell you, you know me, I love the goofy comic book stuff. I don't think that goofy superhero stuff requires a serious explanation as to how it came to be. It is enough that it exists. But at the same time, as far as really organic seeds for a concept like the Fortress of Solitude, this is very good. It's very good.
So, okay, elaborate for me a little bit. Remind me, was there a particular reason he went up went up there to start building it. Did we see something earlier that I missed or forgot about?
No, I think that this is the first time that we've run into this space, which is why he says, hey, I knew that this space would come in handy someday. And again, let me point out that if we need some other textual suggestion that Superman is a bit of an explorer, here it is again in the same episode, right? Very good.
Right.
So no, I think that he just had a space that he had stumbled onto while exploring. I'm backfilling a little bit, but I think there's enough textual evidence for this. And then when he has this super precious relic from Krypton, what's he going to do? Keep it in his closet as Clark Kent?
Right.
Come on. So he just goes and puts it in a super safe space where no one's going to mess with it. And you know, the next time, you can imagine the next time Superman runs into something like that, he's going to go, I know just where to put that. And then eventually in Justice League, we're going to see a whole zoo of last surviving alien creatures. And he's going to have a weapons room where he puts all of his enemies' greatest weapons and stuff like that. It's, again, I am fine with the Fortress of Solitude springing whole cloth from nowhere. But if you're one of those people who feels like there has to be naturalistic explanation for superhero stuff, this is an exquisite example.
No, absolutely. And I dig it. And I kind of like how this decision is really kind of a synthesis between Superman's motivations and what Brainiac was offering. Basically, he's able to take the culture and give it a place that he can visit when he chooses to.
Yes.
But he's not like a slave to any sort of deal or bargain.
Yeah.
It's just there for safekeeping, and he can explore it kind of in his own time. So I thought that was kind of a neat way to bookend the episode as well.
I feel like throwing a little trivia in here just for fun. For those of you who may not realize, the Fortress of Solitude is not originally a Superman idea. The Superman writers stole that from Doc Savage. It's even
really,
yes, it's literally called Doc's Fortress of Solitude, and it's in the Arctic, just the same as Superman's. They stole it whole cloth. And if you know what Doc Savage's nickname was, you won't be surprised that the Superman writers stole some stuff from him. He was very much known as the Man of Bronze. And here we have the Man of Steel. I mean, so there's, yeah, I just thought for those of you who are looking to win a bar bet with nerds, I guess, you know, the Fortress of Solitude is an idea stolen by Superman writers from Doc Savage. Pretty fun.
I am going to bookmark that fact because you never know when it might come in handy on trivia night. Last thing for me, Joshua. Well, two last things. One, just to check in on Superman's power levels.
Oh, yeah.
Superman in this episode, of course, fighting a robot, very powerful. He punches Brainiac right in the heart, which is a pretty cool visual. And because he's a robot, he can get away with it on children's television.
Right.
Pretty cool. Like that a lot. But the thing that I'm kind of, I don't know, flabbergasted as much as I'm just generally amused by. Superman punches a laser. Now, I don't know if we know how lasers work, and I know Star Wars has tainted our idea of how lasers work with like lightsabers deflecting laser beams. But lasers are light, so you can't like really punch them back. I mean, I'm not a scientist, but that is my understanding. So I think it's hilarious that he deflects the lasers specifically back on Brainiac. His strength has gotten so great that he has overcome science and figured out how to punch light.
So punching energy beams is one of those nonsense superhero ideas that I nevertheless love because it lets us see Superman beat a thing in a Superman way. You know what I mean? Like, it makes no actual sense, but in the moment, you're like, law of awesome, this is great. You know?
Exactly. It's perfect. I love it.
Really, really good stuff. I actually have that in my notes also alongside how visceral this fight is, like just punching through the chest and ripping hands off of or, you know, tearing his fingers off. And by the way, that's a part of Brainiac's design I forgot to mention that I really like. When he interfaces with his ship, he gets less and less humanoid. That's a good choice. It's really cool to look at. And then you just have Superman tearing little bits of him off all over the place. And then when there's a laser, he also punches the laser. I love it. I love it.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And again, yes, I do like the Brainiac, especially how his like fingers turn into like wires and stuff. That's pretty cool. I think, Joshua, they were just waiting to get a good human-looking robot on the show that they could just tear apart viscerally. They're like, yeah, we can get away with that. The censors won't stop us. Let's do it. They were just waiting.
To be honest, it would have been really different and not good for him to do that to Metallo.
Oh, yeah.
We would have had very unpleasant feelings about him doing that to John Corbin, even if it's John Corbin's robot body and not his real body. But with Brainiac, right. It's like, yeah, the smaller the pieces, the better, Soups. Go nuts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I also, the visceral fight, very cool, very impressive, very violent. And the last thing was just to wind it down is, how one of Lex's guys says, hey, it appears that when Brainiac was in our system, he downloaded some alien language into the system. And then Lex is like, not today. I've had my fill of aliens. I'm like, come on, Lex Luthor. You're smarter than that. You're getting lazy. Come on.
This is probably the subtlest example that we've had so far of what we've started calling the universal monster ending.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, this is the most low-key example of that because it's like, it's just some code. It's not like the code starts winking at us and going, I'll be back, But we get it. We get it. Like, oh, yeah, he's a program. That's going to be a problem.
Yeah. It was, again, back to that whole, like, I'll be back type of
right.
thing.
Yeah,
it's good stuff.
This threat is over today, but not forever. Is very cool.
Though I will say, it's a while. I looked up, Brainiac doesn't show up for another several episodes. So that's what I'm saying. He doesn't show up often. It's a good, it's like a whole season later before he makes a comeback. So pretty cool setup.
Yeah, no, I agree. As far as like first appearances go, this is some top-notch work right here. All right, Caleb, before we wrap up this animated discussion, tell me about some alternate media recommendations. If people like the themes that we have seen here in this episode, what else should they be watching, reading, or experiencing?
So I've got a movie from Darren Aronofsky today. I love Aronofsky movies in general, just really powerful visual storyteller. But the one I'm going to pick today is actually probably one of my favorite and also one of his lesser-seen movies called The Fountain. It stars Hugh Jackman and Rachel Weisz, who at the time I believe was either dating or married to Aronofsky. No, they're no longer together. But it's a film. There's like 3 separate storylines, all of them featuring the same actors playing different characters in different storylines. But I think the core main one is set present day. Hugh Jackman is a scientist trying to find the cure for his wife's cancer. Or leukemia, deadly disease that is going to kill her. And he gets so obsessed with the science and figuring out how to overcome it that maybe he is not paying as much attention to her human being self. The other 2 storylines, one is set in the distant future with a guy who looks like he's a monk who's flying into space in this very weird looking space bubble. But the whole idea is he's trying to find the secret to overcome death in all 3 of the storylines. And then the core storyline being that he's seeking through knowledge how to overcome death and take control of the situation. So I picked this because it really is about a person who is obsessed with knowledge and finding the answers to life's biggest questions. The biggest being for a lot of people, how does one overcome death or stop death? So I don't get to talk about The Fountain often. So I want to take this opportunity to say, go watch it. It's very sad. It'll make you feel sad things. So if you're really sad right now, especially with everything happening in the world, maybe save it for a rainy day. But I will also say it is very good. And for me, when I saw it the first time, it was a very big source of catharsis. So highest recommends from me, The Fountain. I think it was 2006-ish. Joshua, how about you?
I decided to focus in on the Faustian bargain side of things.
Oh, nice.
And so I have 2 much more lighthearted suggestions for you. I have 2000's remake of I believe, 1967 film, Bedazzled.
Oh, is it Brendan Fraser? Is it the one?
It is Brendan Fraser, and I know that this is a very
yes.
Brendan Fraser-friendly space, so that's why I brought it.
Fantastic. I love this movie. It's funny, I've never watched the unedited version before. I have seen this on TV. Back when I was watching a lot of TV, like in middle school and high school, it played on TV all the time. So I've seen this several times. I love it.
It's great. It's also, it's Brendan Fraser before he kind of fell off the face of the world for reasons that I won't go into here because they're very sad and I'm trying to keep it light. And also Elizabeth Hurley back in that brief early 2000s time when Elizabeth Hurley was really going places, right?
Yeah.
And so the concept here is that Elizabeth Hurley is the devil, and she offers a Faustian deal to Elliot, who is Brendan Fraser. And I really, if you haven't seen this film, go do it. I don't want to say anything else. It's so much fun.
It's a fun time. It's a really fun time. I like it quite a bit. Definitely one of the a nice little trip down memory lane for people who like to revisit films from the early aughts, because it feels of its time in a lot of ways, but in a way that I find to be fun, not sad.
Yeah. I agree. No, that makes total sense. That if that doesn't make sense to you, go watch the movie and see if it does, because to me that works. Similarly, 2004's Ghost Rider.
Joshua, I've never heard anyone recommend this movie for anything, so go on. I'm curious.
Then frankly, you need a better class of friends, because 2004's Ghost Rider is very good, except for the parts that have Ghost Rider in it. And considering that he is a living, breathing heavy metal album cover, how they screwed up that part, I don't know. But let me tell you that if you had stuntman / Elvis impersonator / occult investigator played by Nick Cage, and that was the whole movie, come on, you would go to that 100 times.
Hey, okay. That's fair. I haven't revisited this movie since I saw it in the theater the first time, and I have come to appreciate Nick Cage quite a bit more now. So maybe, you know what, I'll give it a second chance.
The Ghost Rider portions are very boring, and I do not give a crap about them. But all of the stuff that's Johnny Blaze making a deal with the devil and then trying to figure out a way to wiggle out of it, all of that stuff is A++ gold, and I can, in fact, recommend Ghost Rider. I actually have seen it somewhat recently because I rewatched it when I was getting my Moon Boy and Devil Dinosaur tattoo. So if anybody's seen that, it's huge and takes up a big fat chunk of my forearm. So I was there long enough easily to watch Ghost Rider. And I was like, man, this is good. And then Ghost Rider showed up and I was like, that's right. That's why I think this is garbage. But the other stuff is still good.
I take it. I'll take it.
That about wraps it up for this animated discussion. If you enjoyed this conversation and would like to join in, come find us on Twitter. Caleb is at CMastersTalk and I'm at Joshua Unruh. And the hashtag is animated discussion. Caleb, where else can people find you?
Well, Joshua, I'm the editor-in-chief and a contributor at the Cinematropolis, a website that specializes in in-depth film critique and analysis. We publish in-depth essays on all types of films. You can find more of those articles along with our podcast, The Cinematic Schematic, at thecinematropolis.com.
Remember that an animated discussion is a Pulp Diction Productions program and is 100% supported by listeners like you. To find out how you can keep this and our other shows in production, check out patreon.com/Pulp Diction Productions. Show your support by pledging at Patreon or by leaving a great review on Apple Podcasts to make it easier for more people to find us and join in the discussion.
And the links to the Patreon, Apple Podcasts, our recommendations, and Twitter are all very easy to find in the show notes. Thanks so much for joining us for an animated discussion. We'll be back next time to talk about the Batman episode, Joker's Millions.
Until next time, look, up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's an animated discussion.